The reason that the Cincinnati Reds aren't where they should be at this point in the season is not the reason that I thought it would be.
You are Locked On Reds, your daily Cincinnati Reds podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome to Locked On Reds. My name is Jeff Carr, and I'm glad that you're alongside me today. I have loved the Reds since birth. Seriously, I've got the baby pictures and Reds gear to prove it, and this is my 6th season hosting this daily podcast about the Cincinnati Reds. Locked On Reds is for everyone. We try to be positive about our favorite team because, well, sometimes that's the road less traveled with these Reds. Every day, we'll discuss the big thing on every Reds fan's mind. We'll dive into geeky numbers and overreact to the everyday moments of the marathon that is the MLB regular season. I'm glad you're with us today because we're going to look at a brand new geeky stat that I am all about, and we'll be learning all about it today on the podcast and why it helps us understand Elly De La Cruz even more. Also, I'm going to tell you why Sunday's loss is exactly my fear for the rest of the season. But first, I want to check in on things as we are basically a quarter of the way through the 2024 season here on the Locked On Reds podcast that's brought to you by the Locked On Podcast Network. We are your team every single day. And this episode is also brought to you by PrizePicks, the easiest and most exciting way to play daily fantasy sports. Go to prizepicks.com/LockedOnMLB and use code all lowercase LockedOnMLB for a first deposit match of up to $100. All right, we are roughly a quarter of the way through the season. If you divide 162 by 4, you get 40.5. So we're not going to do a podcast halfway through the 41st game of the season. So whatever, here we are, 40 games in, quarter mark of the season. And here's something I didn't think I'd say. The Reds' lackluster lineup has dug this hole that they currently find themselves in. The Reds currently set at 17-23, 40 games into the season. They're 7 games back of first place in the NL Central, 1 game ahead of the Cardinals, who are in last place in the NL Central. This is not where we expected them to be. I expected them to be in playoff contention. You expected them to continue to improve on what they had last year of the 82-80 record with all of these young players, this great young core that the Reds have. It's not been that way. Now, injuries have obviously played a big role. Matt McLain is clearly one of the leaders of this team. At best, he will be back by August, and that is if everything goes right. The most recent reports are on his surgically repaired shoulder that he could be back by August. Now, we know that the Reds are very optimistic about prognoses, so I take that with a grain of salt. But I say that to say this. It's been all Elly De La Cruz so far in the lineup. And look, Spencer Steer's done it a little bit here. Jeimer Candelario's done it a little bit there. Maybe a tiny bit of Will Benson, but there's not been enough of it at any point in this season for a consistently long basis that you can hang your hat on this lineup. And that was supposed to be the strength of this team. This team was supposed to be able to go into dogfights with other opponents. And so far, they're losing all of those dogfights. And it's not because of pitching. In fact, kind of breaking a few things down, I'd be curious of your thoughts on this. If you're watching on YouTube, please jump into the comments section with your response to this. Or if you're listening on your favorite podcast app, by the way, thank you. Make sure you hit me up on Twitter at Jeff Carr with 3 Fs. And let me know what you think, because there are a couple of numbers that I'm curious on how you place. What is the most important number of the ones that I'm about to say? Because the Reds are 9-13 at home. Their record against winning teams is 7-15. They are 1-8 in one-run games. And they are 16th in runs scored, which isn't bad, but they're 29th in Major League Baseball in batting average. Thankfully, they climbed out of last place. They jumped the White Sox, but still, they're only hitting 215 as a team. What grabs you the most out of those numbers? Because for me, and I don't say this as something that it's because they strategized about it and the strategy has failed, but the one-run games thing really jumps out to me. The Reds were above 500. They won more than they lost of one-run games last season. Now they are woefully behind. They are far and away the worst team in Major League Baseball so far this year in one-run ball games. Now, if you were to ask a manager, they don't plan for this. It's not like they go into a game saying, we're going to win us a one-run ball game today, boys. They just want to win. They win by 10, they win by 1, they just want to win. But this is how it kind of falls, and this is more, looking back on what happened and chronicling what happened than it is predictive. There is no predictability when it comes to the record in one-run games, but it does tell you a story about how the Reds got here. Because in moments where you need clutch hitting, this lineup has not been there. And in moments where you need clutch pitching, this bullpen has very inconsistently, really it hasn't been there. I mean, if they had a better record than 1-8 in one-run ball games, I'd be more excited about the bullpen. But the bullpen is part of that problem. In fact, as a whole, the Reds are 18th in Major League Baseball in team ERA. The bullpen is kind of one of the problems of that because the starting pitching has actually been much better this year. That was the biggest concern coming into the season. It's arguably the team's strength right now. Dare I say it? I mean, it's only a quarter of the way through the season. That could change. But look, There's a good thing with this, and we talked about this a couple of years ago, that the whole expected win-loss, some call it the Pythagorean win-loss record, right? We're not going to go crazy with that. But based on run differential, the Reds' record should actually be a little bit better. Now, it's not much better. It should be 19-21 instead of 17-23. We're splitting hairs here. It's better, but it's not good, right? And when I look at this team, it is where it is. And quite frankly, it could be a lot worse if it were not for Elly De La Cruz. He is far and away the best thing about this team right now. He leads the team in hits. He leads the team in games played. He's tied with Spencer Steer for games played and at-bats. He leads the team in runs scored. He leads the team in homers. He's second in RBIs. Leads Major League Baseball by a wide margin in stolen bases. Dude is on pace to do some crazy things on the stolen bases department. He leads the team as far as guys that get everyday playing time. He leads the team in batting average. Now, Jake Fraley has a better batting average, but he hasn't played nearly as much. And Elly De La Cruz definitely leads the team in slugging percentage right now. Seriously. I don't know where this team would be if it weren't for Elly De La Cruz right now. And it needs somebody else. And there's multiple times that I've said, boy, this team really misses Matt McLain. They had guys that could step in, guys you could put in the lineup and maybe be okay with, but they didn't have another Matt McLain. They're not going to. And whenever he gets back, and hopefully he can get into mid-season form pretty soon, because by the time he returns, whether it's August or late August or early September, he's not going to have a whole lot of time to do that. And hopefully the Reds will still be in some sort of running by the time that happens, but they've got to turn some things around. And it's obvious to me, and I want to just mention this for a moment. I'd be curious as to how Steve would respond, but as you notice here today, I'm solo. Steve Offenbaker's not with me. Our schedules are a little bit wonky. In fact, you got me solo today and tomorrow, and then Steve will be running the ship the rest of the week. We're all kind of wonky with our schedules this week. But I say this I'd be curious to his response. I'd be curious to your response. And I didn't think I'd say this, but the Reds miss Joey Votto. The Reds miss, 40-year-old Joey Votto, the guy who has been hurt the last couple of years, the guy that his production has really fallen off the last couple of years. They miss him. because of his presence in the locker room. The Reds don't have that right now. As much as they might have thought they were getting it with some guys, those guys don't fill the shoes that Joey Votto filled last year and the year before that. It was clear to me that in this offseason, it didn't really make sense to bring him back. But now I'm kind of wavering on that. I get it. Like, injuries and stuff have opened up the roster. And quite frankly, he is hurt right now. So it's not as if he would be playing. But it feels like this team misses his presence. And they haven't quite replaced it yet. I don't know how you do that. I don't know how you quantify that. And quite frankly, if they were winning, I don't know if we'd be worried about that. But it feels like right now there isn't that steadying force. Hopefully somebody can take that over soon. But the Reds' surprisingly slow start to this season is made even more surprising because it's the lineup's fault. It's not something I thought I'd say. You know, Sunday's loss to the Giants, the series loss to the Giants, is what my biggest worry is for the Reds the rest of the way. I'll tell you why coming up next. Today's episode is brought to you in part by Policygenius. Policygenius is the smarter way to buy insurance. Their proprietary technology makes it easy to compare personalized quotes and policies from top-rated insurers side by side. With Policygenius, you can find life insurance policies that start at just $292 per year for $1 million of coverage. Some options offer same-day approval and can avoid unnecessary medical exams. Policygenius team of licensed experts is here to answer questions, handle paperwork, and help you make decisions with confidence. They work for you, not for the insurance companies. From exploring coverage options to making policy adjustments as your life changes, Policygenius is here to advocate for you at every step. Check life insurance off your to-do list in no time with Policygenius. Head to policygenius.com/LockedOnMLB or click the link in the description of today's episode to get your free life insurance quotes and see how much that you could save. That's policygenius.com/LockedOnMLB. You've got to check out Locked On Sports Today. It's a free 24/7 sports streaming channel programmed just for you every day to bring you the biggest stories in sports. Locked On Sports Today brings you can't-miss analysis, opinions, and news from all of your favorite local Locked On hosts like myself and Steve to the national shows that cover every league. Streaming 24/7 on YouTube or the free Amazon Fire TV channels app. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, we are your team every day. And speaking of every day, shout out to our everydayers out there. You guys are awesome. You guys and gals are awesome. You're what makes this show go. Thanks as always for making us your first listen every single day. And on the next podcast, we will dive more into these bat speed statistics. I'm going to talk about this a little bit later on in today's show. It's a new stat that Major League Baseball has released on Statcast, but we're going to dive more into these bat speed statistics and how the Reds stack up with the rest of the league. Spoiler alert, it kind of lends a little bit of understanding as to why the lineup has struggled so much this year. But I want to look at this because Sunday the Reds lost to the San Francisco Giants 6-5. It officially meant that the Giants won the series 2 games out of 3. The Giants are going to be a team that the Reds are going to be battling with. I believe that the Giants will be there in the wild card spot, just like they were last year. So these 2 out of 3 losses weigh a little bit heavy early on this season. But that's not what I'm worried about. The way that the Reds lost is what has me concerned because the Reds lineup scoring 4 or more runs, but the pitching allowing 5 or more runs is a scenario that I'm worried about the rest of the way. Because of how we've seen, and I mentioned this briefly a moment ago, because of how we've seen the bullpen move. This was a key example of where the bullpen is right now. Because, okay, you know, the lineup was fine It wasn't clutch. There were a couple of clutch moments, including Elly De La Cruz. This was actually not a good game, and I mentioned that, this was a good, Elly De La Cruz is really the reason that the Reds are where they are, and they aren't worse. But on Sunday, he had a rough day. He was 0 for 5, couple of strikeouts, did have a walk, but ultimately a tough game for Elly. But he was part of this. The lineup wasn't clutch, but it was effective in scoring runs. It was just the pitching failed them. Frankie Montas had a great start. Great first 4 innings of his start. Great start to his start. 5th inning, lost it. Don't know what happened. I don't know if he was tipping pitches or something in the 5th inning and they caught on to it. I don't know if he just lost a feel for his stuff, but he gave up hit after hit after hit after hit after hit. And the Reds went from up 3-0 to down 5-3 in 1 inning. That's the kind of pitching that we're worried about with this ball club. And then you take that a step further, and later on in the game, whenever Lucas Sims ultimately gives up the game-winning hit, the walk-off hit, that was a clutch situation for this bullpen where Fernando Cruz or Alexis Diaz was not available because they'd already pitched. They'd already pitched in the game, or, you can envision a scenario in the future where the Reds are in a situation where the bullpen needs to hold a lead and they just can't call on Fernando Cruz or Alexis Diaz again. Now, Diaz, this was only his 2nd time pitching in like the last 12 days, but I'm saying like in the future, it feels like right now, Fernando Cruz and Alexis Diaz are the only 2 guys that you really trust out of this bullpen. You could maybe make an argument for Brent Suter, but honestly, who else? Maybe Justin Wilson. I trusted Sam Maul. He's in AAA. Good old options, right? But when it comes to key moments, and we talked about the 1-run losses, the key moments for this bullpen, there's only a couple of guys that you really want to see up there. And if David Bell's already used them earlier on in the game, because we knew, and you could watch the way that this went, the Reds score 3 runs super quickly in the 1st inning. And then the Giants come back, take the lead. You're like, okay, this officially has turned into a game that you got to go get. You got to go for this one. You got to manage this one like it's a playoff game. So when the Reds, and David Bell wasn't here for most of it, he got ejected, and Freddie Benavides finished out the game. But whenever the Reds are managing a playoff atmosphere, they need guys they can trust out of this pen. They revamped it. They signed Emilio Pagan. They brought back Buck Farmer. They have Justin Wilson. They added him as well. All these different guys that they brought in, and whether it's slow starts or what have you, they're just not right there right now. I mean, Emilio Pagan started the 10th inning, the bottom of the 10th inning, and he got 2 outs. And then he gave up a base runner, and then they bring in Lucas Sims. So they're showing that the Reds don't trust Emilio Pagan to pitch out of that situation. And then Lucas Sims gives it up. Lucas Sims has had a rough start to his season. I mean, there's not been really too many blow-ups. It's just every time he seems to give up a run, it is a huge run. I think he's had 5 or 6 appearances right now where he's given up a run. But he's also given up a lot of homers, and he's walking a lot of guys. So he's got to figure some things out. Maybe he's just starting a little bit slow, but that's a toughie. And then you add in the fact that they were facing a lefty in this game. That's something that right now the stats don't bear it out. In fact, the Reds have the exact carbon copy batting average, whether it's a right-handed pitcher or a left-handed pitcher. They have a lower slugging percentage against left-handed pitchers, but it's not necessarily what they have put on the stat sheet so far this year as it is the lineup that they have to run out there against a lefty. If they're going to be married to this idea of platoon matchups, they really kind of hamstring themselves a little bit because you don't have Jake Fraley out there. You don't have Will Benson out there. I think that Jake Fraley should really start to see some more looks. And I did see, I heard that his father was tweeting about, Jake Fraley's not playing enough. And it gave me flashback vibes of when Nick Senzel's dad was talking about that last year. But Jake Fraley's actually been pretty good in his limited appearances thus far this year. Came up big with a hit on Sunday's game as well. So maybe give him some more looks. But when the Reds face a lefty, they're married to this platoon matchups idea, and it just hamstrings them, and especially on defense. And as much as Stuart Fairchild's inside the park home run was awesome, and as much as the Reds ending the losing streak was awesome, the 2 losses in this series just weigh so heavily on me that that's kind of where I put my focus. Stu's inside the park home run was fantastic, by the way. That was a lot of fun. And I think I'm not saying that I agree with everybody that's going crazy about Stuart Fairchild and saying that he's going to be the next best thing or whatever. But I do think that he is a guy that has something in him where he can change a ball game in a play. He's not going to do it consistently. It's going to be very few and far between. But when he does, you're going to be like, kind of glad he's on the bench. So I kind of get it a little bit. But still, though, like this Sunday game, with the way that the pitching went, the way that the lineup scored, just didn't score enough because of the way the pitching went, and the fact that they were facing a lefty, this is the worrisome scenario that I have about the Reds the rest of the way. There is a geeky news stat, and I love this stat, but it's a geeky news stat that helps us better understand the awesome power that Elly De La Cruz has at the plate. I will explain why, coming up next. As baseball season rolls along, you don't want to miss your chance to add your favorite players into PrizePicks and turn their performances into cash. And I'm talking about Elly De La Cruz, of course, because if you go over to PrizePicks, you check it out, they've got all the different stats that you can think of for Elly. I mean, you're talking about stolen bases, runs scored, hits, total bases, or, all the different things. Homers. Seriously, if you go over there and all you got to do, you click more or you click less on a statistic, whether it be hits or steals or something like that, that is how you set up your picks. And if you put together 4 or more, so, pick 4 of Elly's stats, just 4 really, you can get up to 100 times your money. That's how easy PrizePicks makes it. It's the reason that they're the #1 daily fantasy app. You got to check them out today. Plus, if you do that, use code LOCKEDONMLB for a first deposit match of up to $100. Again, download the app and use the code LOCKEDONMLB to get a first deposit match of up to $100. All you have to do is you pick more or you pick less. It's that easy on PrizePicks. You can catch every pitch of the Reds' hometown broadcast with SiriusXM. Just download the SXM app and search the word Reds. Also, make sure you bookmark CincinnatiRedsTalk.com for written content about your Cincinnati Reds. I'm writing over there. Steve's writing over there, giving you some more content in between episodes and writing about the Cincinnati Reds. So make sure you bookmark that site today. All right, Major League Baseball has released a new metric for those of us that love geeky stats. And look, I'm not all analytics. I don't go crazy about analytics and stuff. I think it is a great tool to understand what you're watching. It's a great tool to understand a player's performance a little bit better. It is not the end all be all. It's not, I'm not going to this and saying, well, because of this, all of the other stuff on him is wrong and this is right and this is why he's good and everybody thinks he's bad because the other numbers are wrong. I don't do that with analytics. I use it as a tool to understand the whole picture. And they've released this new one, bat speed metric. So you can see how fast a guy swings. You can see some different things, but this is my favorite one. Here is this new stat that is there it is. I was looking in my notes. I lost it. It's called squared up percentage. It compares how much exit velocity was attained on a given swing and a given hit compared to how much potential exit velocity was possible based on bat speed and pitch speed. Look, there's a lot of math involved in that and some physics and things like that. Statcast does it for us, so we don't have to worry about like the calculations and all that stuff. That's why I like this. Is they put the number, they feed me a little number. I don't have to, do the formula and all that other stuff. But we know that so far this season, Elly has been one of the hardest hitters in the league. With the average exit velocity of 93.6, there are only 13 other players who can say they've hit the ball harder on average than Elly. But this new stat shows us why there's reason to be super impressed with that, even beyond just the fact that it's a nice high number and that he's awesome. Because according to the squared up percentage, Elly's just getting started and he's not even really scratched the surface, because Statcast can now measure the bat speed of a hitter and can calculate how often they get all of it, right? We always talk about, man, he got all of that one. There's a number for it now. It's that squared up percentage. And when you look at the number, the 93.6 miles an hour for the average exit velocity on Elly De La Cruz, this new metric says that Elly is only getting 34% of the total exit velocity possible. Yeah. So on average, the swings that he has, the hits that he gets, he could be hitting it a lot harder. That's scary. Because he's hitting the cover off the ball right now. And he doesn't lead the league in homers by any stretch, but there's so many times where he gets a single or a double into the gap, and you're like, man, that line drive was killed. That was a laser. There might be a home run here in the future where Elly De La Cruz hits a line drive that's still going up as it leaves Great American Ballpark. He has so much power, and he is a guy, and I think it's interesting because, and especially as we are starting to inch closer to like draft season and stuff like that, and the Reds getting the number 2 overall pick, we're going to hear more and more. We're going to talk more and more about scouting grades when it comes to players. The hit tool, can he hit for power, running speed, fielding, and throwing. And the grading scale is 20 to 80. 20 means probably not getting to the major leagues at any point, and 80 means he's going to be in the Hall of Fame very soon. Elly had 3 tools graded out as a 70, and his power was one of them. And this shows you why. Because it feels like somebody with a 70 grade power is just going to show up and start hitting 40 bombs a year. And while Elly may eventually do that, this metric kind of puts a little bit more detail, kind of puts a little bit of a finer point to that 70 number. Because as hard as he's hitting it, he's still got a lot more of a percentage that he could get. He's still not getting all of it, which is a phenomenal thing to think about. And I'm still going to understand this a little bit more, because as I read it, it's as it says, squared up percentage compares how much exit velocity was attained to how much potential exit velocity was possible based on bat speed and pitch speed of the given hit. And to me, that means he's only getting 34% of the possible exit velocity that's out there. That means that even though he is in the top 15 of hitters in Major League Baseball for hard hit, for average exit velocity, he still could be getting almost 60% more. That's crazy. And it just shows you why he's only begun to scratch the surface of his potential. There's other reasons too, right? And I'm sure there's been some Elly haters that have seen this and have gone, well, he makes errors and strikes out too much and all this other stuff. Yeah, but he's working on that. Can you imagine what will happen when he eliminates that? I mean, early on this season, like the first couple of weeks, he had a strikeout percentage that was scaring people. And then he cut that by like almost 10% because he's just that good. Because the scariest thing about Elly De La Cruz, really, and when you're, especially if you're an opponent of the Reds, it isn't that he has 3 tools that are 70 grade. It isn't that he's going to lead the league in steals for the foreseeable future. It's that as good as all of that other stuff is, the best thing about his game is his mind for the game. Because if you watch Elly De La Cruz play, he might be just as smart a baseball player as Joey Votto. And that is phenomenal. But I love this new geeky stat because it's going to help. It helps us understand Elly a little bit more. And as I mentioned, I'm going to talk about how the Reds as a team stack up with bat speed and squared up percentage and all that other stuff. I'm going to talk about that on tomorrow's podcast and how they relate to the rest of the league, because it does paint a picture of why this Reds lineup is so bad right now. But I want to thank you as always for making us your first listen every single day. And shout out to our everydayers out there. Thank you so much for being an everydayer. If you're not, make sure that you're subscribed on your favorite podcast app and right here on YouTube, because we're going to be with you all throughout the season, win or lose. Locked On Reds is here for you because we are your Cincinnati Reds every single day.